The last time on our step side, we cleaned it up a little bit and did a little bit of look over what we had, quick walk around, well, maybe a long walk around depending how boring it was, and we attempted to start the engine. This video, I'm going to focus on trying to get the engine running, and that is going to be the sole purpose of this video. So basically, will it run? Because honestly, I don't know if it will run. We're going to find out. So the first step, I mentioned it in the last video, but I'm going to say it again. The first step is to strip this entire front end off so that I can get to everything, because this front end has to come off anyway. But it gives me a little bit easier access and I can get to the pump easier. I need to mark locations. I need to get the engine to top dead center before I pull the pump. Things like that so that I get everything back together right. Or if I get a new pump or a rebuilt pump, I can get it back together correctly easier. So since it has to come off anyway, we're gonna just strip this whole front end off, right off of here. Just a quick note, I had a viewer comment that this short bed maybe looks like it's even been shortened. And I was looking at some other things and I was thinking, you know, I think maybe I got to wondering myself, and I think, like he said, I think it's on a Blazer frame, because the Blazer frame is a ever so slightly different wheelbase. So I crawled under and, well, let's go under. So right up there is a rear body mount. Well, if you have a Blazer, that would be your rear body mount. Of course, there's one over here too, which you can't see very well. To the trained eye, I think there's probably some more indicators, but off the top of my head, I do believe this is indeed a Blazer frame. So that would explain some things like the rear mounted gas tank, why it was so easy for him to do that, because it already had the mounts and everything for the rear gas tank. It wouldn't have had the side saddle tanks. And there's some suspension things that were, I don't know, just in the back of my head. I think some of the mounts for the suspension are a little different on a Blazer. So I believe this is a K5 chassis with the C10 body on it. Kind of made his own K10, but that's why the title works out to be a C10, because he took the kind of bunch of different trucks and made one. So that explains that. I mean, you can kind of tell it's the fender's right up against the front stake pocket, and it's right up against the rear stake pocket. And well, there should be a little more room there. There's also probably a little bit more room between the cab and the bed than there would be. So I'm going to take this bumper off. It'll make it not only easier to refurbish, because let's face it, this Mad Max arrangement here is just, I don't know, it works for me somehow. So I'm probably going to be keeping this bumper just because of the pure insanity of it. So we're going to take that off so we can strip it down and repaint it, but also so we can get to everything. So we got to pull these winch cables, and then I believe it's just has it bolted on each side. Okay, I'm gonna get my tractor up here and get it hooked up before I take those bolts off and it falls and crushes me. So let's get this thing suspended in the air for safety reasons. You know, safety third, folks. Bumper's off. He didn't even modify the frame horns at all, which is good. And I mean, just like the rest of the frame, it looks like it's in pretty good shape. Now this here, I think he welded in. Pretty sure that's not factory. I am gonna take off and salvage this chrome and the lights and the, I think that's still, no, that might be plastic reproduction. I mean, for all I know, this grill might be reproduction too. I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm gonna keep them because I like them and they're good. This chrome's definitely original. And it's in good shape. It's not even dented. So I'm gonna take that off and salvage it. I'm gonna store it somewhere where I'm, you know, least likely to damage it. And then we can start digging into the fenders and the core support. So now with the front end off, we can get a good look at everything, including the core supports and the mounts, which look very good and salvageable. All of the bolt-on points, obviously this is the fender, but all of the bolt-on points for the core support are quite good. That one, yeah, it's got some stuff in there, but it's not rusted away. So, well now, yeah, a little bit of patching needed there, but overall very, very sturdy. This here, all of these, if you saw me take the trim off, I didn't do it right when I got up to here because I saw they were just crumbling from the ends, and so I just took them off because I figured all these were going to need to be replaced, and sure enough, they're all rusted away. But we can easily fix that. We can patch that and drill it out again for the clips, and you can buy new clips, of course. The lower piece, like I suspected, is pretty well, shockingly intact except for the bottom there, but I'm sure you can get a new or used one cheaper than it would take to fix that, but I don't know. That's low on my priority list. So overall, I'm very pleased with the core support. That's a big thing because that's a big chunk of money if you got to get a new or used one. So next, I'm going to take the hood off in preparation for removing the fenders. There's only one of me this time, so this should be exciting. Well, I can tell you one thing. When my significant other finds out that I moved that heavy hood all by myself, I'm gonna be in deep trouble. I'll be staggering around the house and she'll go, "What's wrong?" And I'll go, "Well, I hurt my back." And she'll go, "What were you doing?" And I'm like, "Nothing." And then she'll look out the window and yeah. So there's a couple bolts here that go into the fender. I'm just gonna cold chisel them off because they're never coming out. I don't know if these steps will be reused. This one's bent up pretty bad, and they are just aluminum. Looks like build a frame for them back there. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm gonna reuse them, or I like the look they give the truck, but I'm not sure if I can salvage those. Those might be worthwhile replacing with aftermarket step bars or something, but again, low on the priority list. So we're just going to chisel these out for now, and then we got to zip out all of the bolts around there, and there's bolts on the inside. In here we got to take out to the core support, and then there's a bolt here, and there's a bolt back there, and there's a bolt down there. Fender will come off. Now that's all gone. Now you can see the hydraulic reservoir for the hydraulic pump over there, which isn't in such a good place. I've taken off this fender and inner fender over here. Thought it'd be boring just to watch me do that repetitively on the other side. I didn't bother separating these two because I wasn't sure if I was going to save it, but looking at this one, and I don't know, this inner fender might be savable with a little bit of welding. I'm going to take off the AC box here, and that'll let me dig back here to get to the pump and access it there. And as you can see, hopefully you can see there, it's that way on both sides. It looks like the bottom of the radiator at some point kicked into the fan, or the fan kicked into the radiator. and they repaired it. I mean, it's not leaking, but that significantly reduces some of your cooling capacity there, so I don't know about this radiator yet. I've taken this hydraulic tank off of the core, and I've disconnected the AC lines here. So basically, I think I can just pull the core out from under the radiator here once I pull the bolts out, and there's nothing else fastened to it. I'm going to pull this hose off here. I took the hose clamp off, and I'm going to take this hose off, and I'm going to loop it around or cut it. I might just cut it. This hose, oh, is that a hole? If it's not all the way through, it's pretty close. I'll cut this line probably or pull it off there and loop it around so that we can keep our engine sealed up while we're working. I think I can keep the radiator on here if I pull the core out from under it. I don't know, hopefully I don't have to worry about draining the system or anything just while I'm working on getting it running. So let's keep working getting some of this junk out of the way. I've got the drivetrain completely exposed now. That's all I'm taking off for now. And you can see just how massive this radiator really is. It's I don't know, 2.5 inches thick, and that's pretty big. I wish I knew what this radiator was out of exactly, because that might help tell me what this engine is out of, but again, there's really no markings. But this is definitely a good radiator because it has the brass ends. There's no plastic on this thing. It does have, I think this is a steel support top and bottom, but yeah, and I think, well, these are rusty, so these pipes are steel. They're brazed on here. I don't know. Very big radiator hoses. You can tell this thing has a lot of cooling capacity. You can hear water sloshing. She still has water in her. The coolant is still green, and the heater core was intact. It still had water in it, and that gave me a little bit more confidence. So now we can get to the injection pump, and that was the main reason that I started with this. It's still a little bit tight in there with the frame, but if I do end up needing to remove it, which I think I'm probably going to have to, then it should be a lot easier now. I disconnected the throttle and the shut off, and now you can see that the spring is that way. So shut off is definitely this way, and that's the run position, so we know for sure. I couldn't get that off before because they put the screw in with the screw head down here, and I just couldn't get to it. It was so tight. So the screw was pointing up, and you couldn't get a screwdriver in there because this is the farthest it goes. I don't know why they did that. Boy, I just walked backwards and just cut my ankle on I gotta move that before it cuts through my Achilles tendon. Wherever it is, we'll mark this, and then when we put it back together, we'll have a reference. Because this controls, if you're not familiar with diesel engines, this controls the whole timing of the engine when it fires those injectors by pressurizing the lines and thus overcoming the pressure of the springs inside the injectors and pushing fuel into the cylinders. So it looks like our injection pump, like I thought, is driven right off the back of this air compressor. So we're going to start pulling these fuel and oil lines. Just have to make sure to keep everything clean as we do this. So I have pulled everything except for the oil lines to the pump, and I pulled off the cover. If you haven't watched the last video, this is where we were at. I pulled this off, but I couldn't get my screwdriver in there right to check that the pistons would compress or go down. And I think the cam in there is okay, but these springs are permanently compressed. They're just they're just sitting there. I pushed the pistons down just with a screwdriver just easily down into the bore, and yeah, that's why those 3 cylinders aren't pumping, because yeah, the pistons are moving, but the springs are permanently compressed from sitting for so long. So I'm not saying that guy was lying about having it started at 2 years ago, but I mean, how long do you have to let a pump sit like that before the springs become permanently shaped like that? So, oh boy. I'm not sure I can get individual parts for one of these without getting a complete pump. Also, the fuel rack is broken. Here's the throttle, and when I move that, these should move back and forth in here to open, to let more fuel in, and nothing is moving on that fuel rack. So that's what happens also when that gets stuck. There's a bar in here that goes back and forth and moves those, each one of these adjusters, to turn the piston and let more fuel in. Oh, watch out for falling doors. Anyway, I don't know if that's a Boeing. Was that a Boeing? I don't know. It doesn't matter. I don't care. I just expect a door to come through the roof of my house any day now when these things fly over. Anyway, this pump most definitely has to come off because there's no way we're getting that rack out on an in-frame rebuild. We have to check the cam now, that first #1 cam lobe, and I either have to find replacement parts or I have to find a whole pump and have it adjusted properly for this engine, which is going to be horrifically expensive, but I don't have much of a choice really. So unfortunately, that's where we're at. So I pulled there's 4 bolts that hold this pump to the bracket. There's a bracket that sits down there and the pump sits on the bracket. Tilted a little bit like that. Yep. There's 2 screws that hold that in at 180 degrees, just short little Allen head screws. So you pull those out and then it'll slide back off the timing assembly. I have everything sealed up. I'm also going to obviously tarp it like I have been overnight, because this is probably going to be apart for a while till I can rebuild it. Let's take this off. This is certainly easier without the fender here. I could have done it, but it would have been a real pain. See, just short little screws. Now, according to my calculations, the pump should, oh, glad I marked that beforehand. Now we can get all this junk out of here. Years of dirt daubers and accumulated garbage. So the pump sprung backwards, and that's because some of the springs were compressed inside here. So you can turn it freely, but if you notice, I marked it before I took it off, and there's a corresponding mark on the clutch assembly so that I don't get it 180 degrees at a time. Because of these 2 holes, it can only go on one way or the other, but I'd rather not do it twice. Now we can start tearing this thing down. Just a quick note, this is obvious, but when you take all this stuff off, seal it and label it. I labeled each injector line just to make it easier, and I don't have to waste as much time putting it back on. But yeah, we're going to store them for now while we tear our pump apart. First thing I'm going to do is take these throttle return springs off, because I have to pull the governor. Alright, next step, I'm going to take the governor off the pump here. These screws coming out look brand new. That's something. Maybe this pump truly is low miles. Kind of a moot point though if it doesn't run. Got to drain the oil out of it. Draining right now into a properly approved container. Nope, no it isn't. Well, there's way more oil in there than I thought. Little known fact, that's why they put these dents in tailgates. Nope, no it isn't. Well, that won't be rusting again anytime soon. See, when you move this, when you move the fuel shut off, it pushes the fuel rack backwards and shuts the fuel off, but right now it's jammed in the idle position. Won't move either way, so yeah. Well, so we're on day 2 of this injection pump. It's more difficult to take apart than I thought because this diesel is just sticking everything together. I've got a couple pistons that I got a couple plungers that came out with the piston guides here, plunger guides. It's early in the morning. Terminology just escapes me. Anyway, the pistons are jammed into the so I've got to clean those out, and these aren't supposed to come out of the guides down there, the lifters, whatever they're called. And yeah, so they're not broken, they're just jammed in there. I haven't found anything that's physically broken so far. These springs were not gummed together or worn. It just turns out that there was so much fuel in there that the pistons and everything were just locking the spring in the up position, because the bottom of the piston, bottom of the plunger, locks into the top of the lifter, and so they were squeezed together. And so once I took a punch and drove the part of the spring down, it freed it up and snapped it out of there. It's probably not the best method for that, but yeah. So I have freed the rack up. Fortunately, nothing appears to be broken. All of the gear teeth appear to be intact, so that's a good thing. None of those are physically busted. I'm gonna have to take off this automatic timer assembly, and I'm gonna have to take off the governor weights, and then take the camshaft out of there. When I was taking it apart, I will freely admit my mistakes. I took the governor assembly apart too far, and I took out this pin here like an idiot, and so I had to put it back together. And to do that, you have to back out this adjusting screw, which I believe controls does it control high throttle or idle, one or the other. But I did it by counting the turns and then counting them back in. If I'm lucky, I won't have to readjust that, but I probably will. That's fine. It's not too much effort if we can get the engine running. These require special tools. There's inside threads here. Once you take this bolt off, and you press this automatic timer off with a special tool that threads in there, and it has a center pin, and you drive the center pin in and pull this off. And this one, as you can see, it has this 2-groove nut in there. I don't have the tools for that, so I'm either going to have to buy them or improvise, which I'm not looking forward to. It's hard to do on your own without special skills, tools, and knowledge, none of which I really possess. But I have looked, and I can't find the exact similar pump that I need. I can find many that are very, very close, and they won't be adjusted correctly, and I don't have the bench tools to adjust them. So I'm either looking at sending this one away, or I don't know what I'm looking at. So I'm just going to keep cruising along here. Basically, at this point, I had to pull these two off and pull the camshaft out, and these will slot out the bottom here. I don't know. I'll let you know as things develop. Well, I managed to get the automatic timer off with a 3-jaw puller. Fortunately, they have this hole punched in the end of the shaft, probably from when they machined it on the lathe to hold it. So that worked in our favor. So now I just have to figure out how to get this governor off without the proper tool and without damaging anything, without being too hard on it. Well, lacking the proper tools, I took a rather unorthodox approach to removing this governor flyweight. And that is, I used the valve from the top of the injection pump because it's the exact same thread. So, got unscrew this here and show you a little bit. So put a washer in there to protect the seat, and then a nut on top of the washer to press the shaft out. I don't recommend that because if your threads are even slightly damaged, you can risk damaging these threads, and then you're in it for another one of these. But I figured these are relatively much easier to get than anything else probably in this injection pump. There's the washer I used to protect the seat. So yeah, threads are undamaged. Don't try that at home. So make sure to take your keys out of each end of the shaft so you don't lose them, obviously. So now I can get to the bearing ends on each end of the shaft. So I'm going to take off this housing. I'm going to take off that end cap there. I have both end caps of the cam off. And I have the two bearing block screws for the center block and the cam off. Alright, so it's really hard to find this anywhere on the internet that's actually in English, but if you don't have the gazillion-dollar toolkit to do this, like I don't, you can improvise. So you have to compress these springs so you can pull the cam out. You have to compress them all at once. You can't pull the springs out here because of the tubes and plungers and things that are inside of them. So what you need to do is you need to rotate the cam until each lifter comes up, and then you need to stick a pin in the hole. And there's a special toolkit with special shaped pins. You can't align them straight because you got this lip here. Well, since I'm a tool hoarder, I have all of these tiny Allen wrenches and so forth, and they just work great for sticking in the hole and compressing the spring. You have to compress all those so you can actually pull your cam out, because otherwise the lobes are going to hit the lifters and things as they come out. And then don't forget the center block that's in there. As you pull it out, you kind of got to be gentle with it. So tips and tricks 101. This is certainly not being done right, but I'm doing it very slow and as careful as I can. So there's also another special tool that you use to compress these again once you have the cam out to get your pins out. Well, if you don't have that special tool like I don't, find a combination of sockets or extensions that works, and then drive this plug in to compress that lifter up off the pin. That's all there is to it. Alright, so now we can extract our parts out the bottom, as the instructions say. And oh, the instructions I don't have, because I cannot for the life of me find a manual for this pump. I try to find and make up all the little tips and tricks I can as I go along, but unfortunately for injection pumps there's not that many tips and tricks, because it's not really, it's very precision operation like I've said before, and not really made to do this on your truck tailgate. So but like I said, I don't know about this pump anyway, because I mean, there's like, I still have to get the pistons out of these guides and so forth, and yeah, so I don't know. Let's see what we have. I have it as a part as I need to take it. Unfortunately, we had one casualty, and that is this plunger seat. Got a little bit of a broken piece there. I can't really come out of that seat. It would really have to be off to the side, or really not centered. If it's not centered, that means we got something else wrong. So I'm thinking, if I cannot find just this seat, then I'll have to, I'd like to get a rebuild kit for this anyway, with new rubber seals and gaskets, and do it the right way. Which is ironic, because I'm not doing anything else the right way, but you know, the right way. But I think that in a pinch, that will work. I don't know if that was broken before just from being hammered around in there because all this stuff locked up, or if I broke it. I'm not sure. That's where we're at. Other than that one thing, everything else seems to have survived. The rack, all the teeth on the rack are okay. So that's good. Yeah. They all survived. So everything, just from being locked up from fuel, I'm kind of surprised that everything did survive, but well, we'll order the gaskets and rebuild kit and things we need, hopefully, and see if we can find that seat and free those up, and basically we'll put this thing back together again. So the time has come to put this pump back together, and I was very careful taking it apart. You can never be too careful. I kept all of the matched cylinder parts for each cylinder matched together. Now, we had 2 broken spring seats, and I have tried my best to find replacement parts for those, and even with the exact Bosch part numbers, the Bosch replacement part numbers, I cannot find a good place to order them. I have tried to contact several diesel places, and they won't get back to me for whatever reason. I think the spring seats are good enough, unless we have some catastrophic failure, like the pump gets gummed up again. I don't think they'll fail. I think they'll be okay for the time being. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of money on this anyway, because I don't even know if this engine runs. So we're gonna put this back together with all of the parts that came out of it. There's 1,000 things that could go wrong here. I don't think it'll ever run perfectly, because this isn't a perfectly tuned or adjusted pump anymore. If we get the engine running, and if it's a good engine, then maybe we'll try to find, at the very least, a replacement pump body. I can't find one with the proper governor on it. I have tried to look up this engine everywhere, what it came out of possibly, and honestly I have no idea. They put these engines in excavators, they put them in some of the cab forward trucks, mostly not in the States though. These engines, the Isuzu 6BB1 is a very oldish engine. We're talking, 70s design. Even though they used them into the 90s, they were less common because they had already gone to the 6BD series and so forth. So they're very difficult to find to begin with, but I still haven't found one that has a manual shutoff on the governor. They either have a solenoid or that plate is blocked off and there's no shutoff that way. So I don't know what to make of that. If I knew maybe what this engine came out of, it might help me find this pump, even though I have the exact pump numbers and everything. If I could find a diesel shop that would be willing to work with me, I might be able to find it. Anyway, we're going to try to put this thing back together, and I don't recommend doing any of this in any way, shape, or form unless you know what you're doing, and I certainly don't, and certainly not on your truck tailgate. So I don't recommend any of this. Don't try this at home. Don't ever attempt it. It probably won't work, etc., etc., etc. All right. That said, let's get cracking. So, before you take one of these apart, make sure, absolutely, that you mark it. I don't know if you can see that scratch line on there. Right there. So, this is important because this controls part of your rack. This is one of the 1,000 adjustments that you need to get right. You don't necessarily have to take these apart, but I did because I had to get the pump apart and it was fighting me, and so I was taking apart every single thing that I could to get it where it needed to be. So line up those marks, then you can tighten this down. This is another reason you can't interchange parts, once you mark them and everything's where it's going to be. So I put the top piston guide in. Excuse my technical terms because, yeah, there's a little bit of lubrication. And now I carefully adjusted the first one, and I'll adjust the rest according to the first one as far as where the shutoff is. And the way you do that is according to this helical cut in the piston and where it intersects with the hole that's in the guide. And as you turn this whole assembly, as the rack turns it, that guide is going to get closer to the top of the piston or closer to the bottom of the piston. That's going to change how much fuel that it lets in, because it's going to reach that point sooner or later where it closes off the fuel access to the input hole. This is something you can't really adjust later easily, so you have to get it right the first time. I'm looking at the notch. Each one of these holes is centered on a bore for the cover, and so I'm centering this line on the bore as a reference. You can only do this after the first one's in, so that'll tell you if you're in the proper tooth relative to the rest. If you do this wrong, you can get a runaway engine pretty easily, or it just won't run, or it won't run well, or I mean, there's 1,000 things that can go wrong here. So then I'm putting in the upper spring seat and the spring, and then I can put this is one of these lower seat guides. Really the only way it can come out is if it somehow slides out this way, so tilts in the bore, but it shouldn't be tilted, so I'm thinking that these should work. Now in this case, in this position, the A29 is facing up, so I'm aligning them that way. That also works because you can put it down in the seat, whatever. But you're going to have to realign it once you get it in. Make sure to gently, ever so gently, align it in the bore, because you don't want to scratch your bores or anything. These are very, very high tolerance. So now we can align the straight part of the piston with the groove on the bore, because they have to mesh together. If you get them in wrong, you'll mess it up. So once you have your spring and your lower seat in, then you can take your tuck in there. Anyway, this is a roller tappet for the cam, and this is the shim washer that controls the timing of the valve. And the way it does that is it hits that helical groove sooner or later, and you adjust this by putting in different thickness shims. But I'm putting everything back where it came from, so we should be okay. Should be. Of course, that pin keeps it from rotating in the bore once you have it in, because you don't want that, because it's a roller. Make sure that's started in the groove, because again, you don't want to get anything misaligned before you start putting pressure on things. So now I'm going to put my socket spacer in, and we can start compressing the spring. Again, as you compress it, make sure the piston and the piston guide are aligned. Once you have the pin in, you can take pressure safely off the spring. So you can see what I'm doing there, putting a pin in each hole to keep the springs compressed. So I'll just keep doing that until we can reinstall our cam, and then we can pull the pins out. So I'm going to put the automatic governor back on, and then I can rotate it to get my pins out of the springs. It's up against number 1 right now, so I gotta have some torque to rotate that shaft. So now you can see it works as it's supposed to. You can throttle up and you can stop it, and both return to idle. So pull to stop, throttle up, idle. So I can put some of this back together. I still got to take the automatic tensioner off to replace that seal. This one, in a pinch, I could probably reuse it, but since this is one of the few parts I could actually order, because you can see it has part numbers on it, and of course I can measure. And remember, these access plugs are the bottom, basically, of your oil pan for this camshaft. So you got to seal them from the factory. It looks like they used a little bit of sealant on the threads, and that is basically what I'm going to do. I don't need a lot, just enough to make a mess if you touch it wrong like me. Like I said, I definitely don't recommend any of this because this pump is probably out of adjustment on about 3 or 4 different factors I can think of off the top of my head. Not large adjustments, but they're probably tiny little calibrations that I don't have the capability to recalibrate. So this is a test pump to see if the engine will run. Alright, there it is. The only thing we're waiting on now is that front oil seal. Alright, so one last thing for this injection pump. I could not find any of the seals or gaskets for that, and that's why I cheated and used RTV on the oil seals. But that's fine. I could find this 17mm shaft seal. I think it's 28mm on the outside. I don't know. It doesn't matter, but yep, I think that'll do the trick. I think this seal driver should work nicely. Right around the outside. Put the automatic timer on. I don't think I mentioned it before, but this automatic timer, it's got like another flyweight assembly in there. It works kind of like the weights in a gas engine distributor. As they fly to the outside and compress springs, this will adjust a little bit to advance timing or retard it a little bit as your engine operates. It's completely based off of RPM. We're ready to put this back on. I won't bore you with the details of that. So I'm going to run this from clean diesel. I'm not even going to try to run this old junky stuff anymore because it's just, it's beyond old. It's beyond even old for diesel. So I'm going to clean this filter. Well, I'm going to look inside and I'm going to see what the state of it is. Honestly, I have no idea what we're going to find. Should be interesting. Ugh. It is dirty. But that should flow fuel for what we're doing, so I'm not going to replace it until after I see if the engine runs. There's a little bit of gunk in the bottom, but overall, not terrible. Would have expected worse for rotten fuel. Wish you could smell this, but I'm smelling here. I mean, it's old. Looks like our post is pretty good. I guess by the look of it, it was kept submerged in fuel, so should be all right. Well, let's put this back on, and if I get the engine running, I will replace it with a good one, a better one, a new one. You know what I mean. I have fuel and oil hooked back up to the injection pump. I don't think I have any chance of this thing getting started with these injectors. I'm guessing the injectors are as bad as the injection pump, so I'm gonna clean this up so we don't get junk down inside, and I'm going to pull the injectors one by one and take a look at them. So I pulled the number 1 injector. My goodness, it's carboned up there. I won't even have a chance. Well, I'm going to see if I can clean this. Alright, I took apart the number 1 fuel injector and the nozzle, and I finally got the plunger out of the nozzle. And I think it'll work. Cleaned it up with a little Scotch-Brite. I made sure the nozzle holes were clean. You want to be very careful because these are such high tolerance. Generally, it's better just to buy new ones. You can buy this new nozzle assembly. And I made sure the injector holes are cleaned. I believe there's 4 of them, one at each quadrant. And I made sure they're all clean. And you can tell because you can shine a flashlight down here, cup your hand around the flashlight in a dark room, and look down and count the light holes. They weren't all. I took a very, very small needle and poked the gum out of them. Again, this is not something you want to do because these are high tolerance parts, but I'm going to put this back together, and that's one injector. Now I got to do that 5 more times because I imagine they're all like this. So it's pretty obvious how you get these injectors out, but I figured I'd just point it out real quick. There's a nut each side, and then you just got to pull it out of the hole. It helps to loosen it up a little bit first. Once they're kind of loose like that, then you got to get them up and out. So the easiest way to get these injectors out is to put a socket up here with a little breaker bar on it. Get a pry bar, kind of gently pry under there as you wiggle it back and forth like that until you can pop it up. Oh no, there is an awful lot of carbon buildup. This is the number 5 injector. A whole lot of carbon buildup for this supposedly being a low miles engine, but I don't know. Well, I got them all but the number 3, and that was wedged in there so tight the pin on the plunger broke off, so I guess we're ordering a new nozzle now. Our new injector nozzles came, so you can put those in. I ordered 2 because another one has a questionable spray pattern on it. I think maybe only 1 or 2 of the holes are unplugged in the nozzle. So it's going to be really inefficient if I don't replace it. And since I had to order 1 anyway, I figured I'd order another. In an ideal world, replace them all, but then I have to pull the injectors again. And like I said before, I don't know if this engine runs, so we will wait and see. And if the engine runs and the cylinders are unbalanced or the temperatures are different, then we'll worry about that down the road. But for now, we're going to replace these 2 nozzles, and then I think we'll be ready to set this thing up for a fire test. Well, I think we're ready to start bleeding this. I got this fitting loosened up here. We're going to fill the filter. I got my battery ready to hook up. I got my engine trigger there. I guess to save my battery, let the fun begin. Oh, I gotta put them in the diesel can. It's diesel, not kerosene like it says. You'll just have to take my word for it. Put both of them in there. Now we will just pump for hours on end until we get fuel out of there. Easy peasy. Well, that was a lot quicker than I thought, so all right, tighten that down now. Lost my wrench already. Oh, there it is. All right. Now, lead down to the pump rail. Oh, there we go. Okay. It's not as hard to bleed as I thought it was going to be. But we're going to be pumping all day. I guess that primer is in a lot better shape than I thought. Okay, I do need to put that second bolt in. As you can see, I haven't cranked it over yet, and I only put the outside one in. I didn't want to crank it over with, you know, loose injectors and so forth, so we'll take that off and we'll crank it over 180, put that bolt in, and then we'll crank it over and look for fuel out of each one of those. Got those bolts on, and these marks still line up. No fuel. So I'm going to try to do this with a little longer brakes because I really don't want to kill my starter, because that'd just be one more thing we'd have to replace with no budget. So yep, bleeding the pump. Fun, fun, fun. Still no fuel, eh? Maybe if we bleed it with the throttle open? I don't know. Try that. Maybe it'll bleed faster. Oh, there we got some. So we got fuel number 6. I guess that means I can hook up that fuel line. Okay, we've got 1, 6, and I think 5 bled. I think it's 5. And 4, so I can put those 2 on now. Alright, that's number 3. Now I can put that one on. Now it's down to number 2. Alright, put that on and then make sure we're getting fuel out of our lines at the injectors, which I don't see why we wouldn't unless a line was plugged. Oh, already getting fuel out of number 1 and number 4. Tighten down number 1 and number 4 and put on the 2 line. Alright, number 6 also had fuel in it, so we're waiting on number 2. This one, oh, this number 5 has fuel too. Okay, so 2 and 4 looks like. We're just waiting on, no, 2 and 3. What did I say? Oh, 3 has fuel out of it too. Okay, we're gonna have our piece of wood handy, real handy here to smack over the end of this air intake if something happens that I don't want to happen. All right, but you know, knowing my luck, it won't start. But I think the only thing remaining is we're waiting for fuel out of this one. I need to let our starter rest and our battery charge up a little bit. I'm going to let it sit here and cool down for a bit and hook my battery charger up. It ran! It ran! Now our starter and battery need to recover again, but it did run. I have a little bit of a leak right there I will have to resolve, but I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. All right, round 2. Thing sounds like a tractor. I mean, it basically is. Okay, gotta let the starter and battery cool down again. The compression on this thing must be great because it's just being really rough on this starting system. All right, try number 3. psi of oil pressure. Thing's hitting the fan, I'm sure that's fine. Loose belts, sure. Tachometer's jumping around like mad, but oil pressure looks good. Don't know if that works. Number 6 is firing. Number 5, maybe. Yeah, I'm gonna say yeah. I'm gonna say yeah. And definitely not. Well, we know number 1 isn't firing because of the injector leak. They stripped the thing out. Pulsing from the air pump, so that's good. Oh, I feel vacuum. Okay, so I feel vacuum from the line up there, and I feel air pulsing out of the air pump, so that's good. I'm gonna bring her up to operating temperature, I guess, to see what happens. Oh yeah, best day at work ever. Get this thing nice and heat soaked here. What are we up to? Not quite 160, 150-ish. Still good oil pressure. I'm impressed. Seems like the idle's set right. I don't know. Maybe I got everything back where it was supposed to be. Miracle of miracles. Look, she's not smoking too bad. A little bit of smoke. I don't know if you can see it. But overall, I mean, like nothing. Let me rev it for you with the exhaust. Okay, now we're down to about 72, 73 psi as it gets warm, and we're about 170 and seems to want to hold there, so yeah. I love it, it's a monster. I love it. Basically, I want to make sure I bring it up to operating temperature to heat soak all the gaskets, because this thing hasn't really probably been heat soaked in, what, 32 years? So, yeah. Alright, let's try and shut her down. Okay, that works. Didn't even need my emergency board. Didn't see much blow by, that's good. Now that she's been run a bit. Oh my goodness, the oil is still tremendously clean after even that. Look at that. Not bad at all. This dipstick does look brand new. I don't know, maybe this is a low hours engine, hard to tell. Something's sitting for 32 years, you just can't say. Oh, this engine is going to be sweet though, I can tell already. Now, let's see how it does on a hot start, shall we? Not bad. Well, so let's see what we evicted from the exhaust here. Oh, somebody was living in there. It blew her right out of there. Well, I think that'll do it for this one. We did get it running, and it has the SM465, so I'm almost certain it'll drive. Next time, maybe we'll drive it around a bit. I want to get the tack working, and I gotta find a tire or a 6-lug wheel with a tire for the rear so I can actually, you know, roll it. Yeah, I mean, it runs fantastic. Better than I had even hoped, especially after I did all that rebuilding, you know, on my truck tailgate. So yeah, there's just a few minor things to do to the drivetrain, and we can pull this cab off of here and start reconditioning the frame and stuff. But I do want to, you know, verify that the drivetrain works and everything before I go too much further. So hopefully next time I'll have this in a state where I can actually drive it around a little bit. If you want to see that, please subscribe. That way you'll know when it comes out. You'll get that notification or hit that notification bell. I don't know how it works. I'm not an expert. And we are going to have more of this, hopefully coming up relatively soon. I just wanted to say I had a lot of fun this time. These kind of projects are the ones that are really fun for me, not the everyday ordinary projects, these oddball things. So, and I do also want to mention that we just hit 1,000 subscribers on the channel and actually soared a little bit over that. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you very much, all of you who subscribed and got us past that first hump. Maybe spread this video around a little bit and get some more people interested and drum up some more interest, and maybe I'll get to this project even faster. Anyway, I appreciate so much everyone who watches and comments and likes and subscribes, and I do appreciate it. So thank you again, and as always, thank you for watching.